There's a peculiar ache that comes with feeling invisible. Not the literal kind. You're seen, you're acknowledged, you exist in rooms and conversations. But there's a difference between being noticed and being truly seen. And when you spend enough time in that gap, something shifts inside you. You start to wonder if you're living your life or just watching it happen to someone who looks like you. To feel invisible is to stand in a crowded room and still feel alone. It's hearing laughter and knowing you're not part of the joke. It's speaking and watching eyes drift past you as if your words were made of air. You learn to shrink, not because you want to, but because it feels easier than reaching out and finding nothing there. You become an expert at blending in, at taking up less space, at convincing yourself that being overlooked is just the way things are. But here's what people don't tell you. Invisibility isn't passive. It's exhausting. Every day, you're fighting a quiet war between wanting to be seen and fearing what happens if you are. You rehearse conversations in your head, imagining what it would be like to speak up, to be heard, to matter. But when the moment comes, the words stay locked inside. Because what if you finally show yourself, and still, no one looks? The psychology of invisibility often begins early. Maybe you grew up in a household where attention was scarce, where being quiet meant being safe. Maybe you learned that your needs were secondary, that love was conditional, that the best way to avoid disappointment was to expect nothing. So you adapted. You became the person who listens instead of speaks, who gives instead of asks, who fades into the background because at least there, you can't be rejected. Or perhaps it started differently. Maybe you were once loud, once bold, once unafraid to take up space. And then something happened. A betrayal, a rejection, a moment when you offered yourself fully and were met with indifference. And from that wound, invisibility grew. Not as a choice, but as a shield. If no one sees you, no one can hurt you. If you don't matter, you can't be discarded. It's a cruel kind of logic, but it makes sense when you're trying to survive. What makes invisibility so painful is that it's not just about others. It's about how you begin to see yourself. When the world treats you like background noise, you start to believe that's all you are. You stop asserting your presence. You stop believing your thoughts are worth sharing. You apologize for existing, for taking up time, for asking questions, for having feelings. You become so used to being overlooked that you start overlooking yourself. And the loneliest part? No one knows. Because invisibility is invisible. People assume you're fine, that you prefer the quiet, that you're just shy or introverted or independent. They don't see the nights you lie awake wondering why connection feels so impossible. They don't see the way you watch others form bonds effortlessly, like it's the most natural thing in the world, while you stand on the outside trying to decode a language you were never taught. They don't see the small, repeated heartbreaks of being forgotten, left out, talked over, dismissed. You start to develop coping mechanisms. You tell yourself you don't need people, that solitude is strength, that being self-sufficient is a virtue. And maybe it is, but sometimes it's also loneliness dressed up as independence. You convince yourself that you're above needing validation, that you're too mature for superficial connections, that you're fine on your own. But deep down, there's a part of you that's still waiting for someone to notice, waiting for someone to ask how you really are, waiting for someone to see past the surface and recognize the person you've been hiding. The mind of someone who feels invisible is constantly negotiating with itself. One part of you craves connection, while another part sabotages it before it can hurt you. You want to be seen, but you're terrified of being exposed. You want to matter, but you've convinced yourself you don't. You want to belong, but you've practiced detachment for so long that vulnerability feels like a foreign language. It's a battle between hope and fear, between reaching out and pulling back, between believing you're worthy and believing you're not. And then there are the moments, brief, fleeting moments when someone does see you. A stranger makes eye contact and smiles. A colleague remembers something you said. A friend reaches out first. And for a moment, the invisibility lifts. You feel real again. You feel like you exist in a way that matters. But then the moment passes, and you're left wondering if it was real, or if you imagined it. You're afraid to hold on to it too tightly, because what if it never happens again? Over time, invisibility changes you. It makes you hyper-aware of others, how they move through the world, how they're received, how they seem to belong in ways you don't. You become an observer, a listener, someone who notices the smallest details because you're always on the outside looking in. You develop empathy because you know what it's like to be unseen. You become the person who remembers birthdays, who checks in, who makes others feel heard, because you know how much it matters. In a strange way, invisibility makes you kinder, but it also makes you lonelier. There's a particular kind of grief in feeling invisible, not the grief of losing someone, but the grief of never being found. It's mourning a version of yourself that never got to exist fully, the version who spoke without second-guessing, the version who believed they were worth knowing, the version who didn't have to fight for a place in the world. You grieve the relationships you never had because you were too afraid to reach out. You grieve the opportunities you missed because you assumed you wouldn't matter. You grieve the person you could have been if someone had just seen you sooner. Have you ever felt invisible? Like you're standing in a room full of people, but no one really sees you. Here's a thought. You're not invisible. You're overlooked. And that's not on you. It's on a world that moves too fast, rewarding loudness over depth. You are not a supporting character. You are the entire story, full of quiet revelations that others haven't taken the time to read. But your worth isn't determined by their attention. The change happens when you stop waiting for permission to be seen and start claiming your space. It starts small. Speaking up even when your voice shakes. Sharing a thought. Setting a boundary. It's scary, I know, but the more you hide, the more you disappear to yourself. The moment you decide to stop shrinking, you become more real. Being seen starts with seeing yourself, looking in the mirror with compassion, not judgment. And as you honor your own presence, the right people will notice. They'll see your depth, your quiet strength. You'll find your people. If this resonates with you, let me know. You are not alone.